Hi everybody. So I want to take a few minutes here to explain what you need to do for this week's discussion. So we are going to be looking at another poem, but again, don't get too hung up on the fact that it's a poem. I'm choosing poems first because you will be learning about poetry when you get to the Humanities 201 class later in your program. So this is kind of an introduction to poetry in that sense, but for the purposes of these discussions, it's really not about poetry. I simply decided to use poems to give you that brief introduction for what you'll need later. But really, it's just, I chose tricky poems so that we would be forced to use our critical thinking skills in a different way to figure out what is going on in the poem. So don't worry about the fact that it's a poem. It's just something you're being asked to read that is not so easy to figure out, and you have to use your critical thinking skills and close reading skills to figure out as much as you can, right? Okay, so we're going to look at My Last Duchess by Robert Browning. It is a strange poem. It is not easy to understand right away. It's an older poem, and the language is not always easy to decipher. It's not like Shakespeare old, but it's still not as modern as the English we use today. So it can be a little tricky, okay? Look up any unfamiliar words if you need to, okay? Using a dictionary is okay. I'm going to read the poem at the end of this video. You're going to need to read through it again on your own as well. And then you're going to answer the questions in task 2. So the first question is, what do you think is going on in the poem, right? And this is where looking up any unfamiliar words can be helpful. And question 2 is to pull out words and phrases and lines from the poem that made you think that's what it's about, right? So question 1, what do you think it's about? Question 2, what's your evidence, basically. All right? You might not really understand the full poem, even after reading through it a few times. And that's okay. Just do your best. What did you pick up on? What do you think is going on, even if you don't understand the whole story? Were there parts of it that you picked up on? Okay? Do not use any outside sources. Again, the discussions are based on effort, not correctness. The whole point is to just start using those critical thinking skills in a new way. You'll get the full story in next week's journal assignment. There will be a follow-up video, like always. Okay? So just do your best. Do not use any outside sources unless it's a dictionary. Okay? What do you think is going on in the poem, and what specific parts of the poem made you think that that's what it's about? Okay? All right. So try to have your first post up by Thursday so that everyone has plenty of time and options to choose 2 classmates to respond to by Sunday. The discussion will remain open for an additional week, but remember, if you post during that additional week, it's at a 50% point reduction, so we want to do our best to get it completed on time. Okay? All right, so I'm going to read the poem now. Again, it's called My Last Duchess by Robert Browning. That's my last Duchess painted on the wall, looking as if she were alive. I call that piece a wonder, now. Frau Pandolf's hands worked busily a day, and there she stands. Will it please you sit and look at her? I said Frau Pandolf by design, for never read strangers like you that pictured countenance, the depth and passion of its earnest glance, but to myself they turned, since none puts by the curtain I have drawn for you but I, and seemed as they would ask me, if they durst, how such a glance came there. So not the first are you to turn and ask thus. Sir, 'twas not her husband's presence only called that spot of joy into the Duchess's cheek. Perhaps Frau Pandolf chanced to say, her mantle laps over my lady's wrist too much, or paint must never hope to reproduce the faint half-flush that dies along her throat. Such stuff was courtesy, she thought, and cause enough for calling up that spot of joy. She had a heart, how shall I say, too soon made glad, too easily impressed. She liked whatever she looked on, and her looks went everywhere. Sir, 'twas all one, my favor at her breast, the dropping of the daylight in the west, the bough of cherries some officious fool broke in the orchard for her, the white mule she rode with round the terrace, all and each would draw from her alike the approving speech, or blush at least. She thanked men, good, but thanked them somehow, I know not how, as if she ranked my gift of a 900-years-old name with anybody's gift. Who'd stoop to blame this sort of trifling? Even had you skill in speech, which I have not, to make your will quite clear to such an one, and say, just this or that in you disgusts me, or here you miss, or there exceed the mark. And if she let herself be lessoned so, nor plainly set her wits to yours, forsooth, and made excuse, even then would be some stooping, and I choose never to stoop. Oh, sir, she smiled no doubt whenever I passed her, but who passed without much the same smile? This grew, I gave commands, then all smiles stopped together. There she stands, as if alive. Will it please you rise? We'll meet the company below then. I repeat, the Count your master's known munificence is ample warrant that no just pretence of mine for dowry will be disallowed, though his daughter's self, as I avowed at starting, is my object. Nay, we'll go down together, sir. Notice Neptune, though, taming a seahorse, thought a rarity, which Klaus of Innsbruck cast in bronze for me. Duke's an interesting fellow, isn't he? I will say, again, it's not an easy poem to figure out. You're going to pick up on some things, probably. He definitely implies certain things, and my advice to you would be, maybe we shouldn't fully trust him. So, do your best, and I look forward to reading your responses, and you guys will get the whole story in next week's follow-up journal.